Good morning and welcome to the NBA Daily for December 24th, 2024. Coming up, it's Christmas Day and we're talking about all the games. We've got S sitting down with James Edwards to talk Spurs Knicks. I sat down with Jared Weiss to talk about Sixers Celtics. Zena got a chance to sit down with Anthony Slater to talk Warriors Lakers. And then Andrew Schlecht and Alex Speers give their Christmas wishes for the NBA. Good morning, everybody. We wanted to wish you guys a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Whatever reason you're celebrating this time of year, it's a good one, and we hope you have a safe and happy time. Enjoy the games on Christmas. It's going to be a good time. We got Steph and LeBron. We've got Wemby in New York. It's going to be great. Coming up, guys, we got S sitting down with James Edwards to talk about that game, to talk about why Wemby is playing on Christmas and why the Knicks might have one of the best offenses in NBA history.
All right, well, we're joined. Happy holidays, everyone. Everybody listening right now, we're joined with James Edwards III, senior writer for The Athletic, covers the New York Knicks. Is this your first Christmas game?
It is. I was just actually doing a pod with Vincent Goodwill before this, and we were talking about that. Yeah, my first Christmas game. I'm not sure how I feel.
Different than getting the day off, for sure.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'm fine with it because, like, again, I'm not home. I'm obviously I live in New York now, and both my parents don't live in Michigan, and my sister doesn't live in Michigan, so it's like I would have to travel anyway. And it worked out too. My mom's in Florida, and the Knicks play in Orlando 2 days after Christmas, so I'll be able to go. I'll be able to be with my family. Yeah.
Okay. Well, happy holidays, my guy.
Thank you.
Look,
you too.
I mean, look, if there's any place to be on Christmas for basketball, it's Madison Square Garden for the matinee game. That's like a staple at this point for the NBA. And it's going to be a great game between the Knicks and Spurs. I want to get into the Knicks first, though, because I think for the audience, for most people, Christmas is when they really start tapping into the NBA, really start listening in. And so, they have that opening night game where they get clobbered by the Celtics. They've been battling and grinding to find their identity. We had you on like about a month ago in which you were telling us like they're still struggling to figure out what their identity is. Now about 25 to 30% into this season, they're third in the East. They've played really, really good basketball. Got a couple of guys who are definitely in all-star consideration. Has this team figured it out for what kind of basketball they want to play or what style they want to play?
I think they're getting there. I think we have a better idea of who they are. They're going to be an elite offensive team who the majority of the time are going to be able to just outshoot their opponents to death with efficiency.
Yeah. And
they're going to be defenses that they still shoot efficiently against, but struggle in terms of like how many possessions they get up, whether it's more threes, less twos, whatever. Certain teams do give them issues there, but they still, regardless, find ways to shoot efficiently. Defensively, they've gotten better. I don't think this team is going to be a top 10 defensive team. It could happen because they do have a very easy stretch here. They just played in New Orleans. They have Toronto tonight, San Antonio, who's good, Orlando, who's banged up, 2 Washingtons, and then Utah.
That's a breeze. That's easy.
So that should help with your defense. But with that said, they've lost to Utah. They struggled with Orlando the other day. They struggled with Toronto. So none of these are gimmies, and San Antonio's good. So you never know what can happen. But I do think they're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable with who they are. And at the end of the day, they're just a team that has so many good shot makers, and they can make shots from all over the floor.
It seems like, and this is from just watching them a lot, they have a lot of fun on the court. And, you wrote that piece about Mikal Bridges and the amount of trash that he talks on the floor, which I wouldn't have known, watching it on TV.
I was shocked.
I don't think you really get it. So what is it about this group of guys? I know we know the Nova kids and whatnot, and then OG and his personality, but like, what is it about this specific group that has them playing fun basketball?
Yeah, I think they just have good dudes in the locker room. I think it comes down to that. But also, like you said, there's the Nova connection. Cat comes in. Cat's a guy who just wants to be liked. He's a likable guy. Like, he's always, even in Minnesota, always propped up his teammates. And, he's just a nice guy. So for whatever jokes people like to have about Cat being around him, he's genuinely a very nice guy. And I think it's hard to dislike somebody who's that nice. Obviously, Josh Hart's funny. Even guys like Deuce McBride, funny, campaign, hilarious, like great locker room guy. They just have really good guys in the locker room. They have a lot of guys who know how to play basketball. And like you see it with how efficiently they are as a cutting team, how much they share the ball. Like Tibbs' teams were not high assist teams in the past. This team shares the ball with the best of them in the NBA. Yeah. Just very smart, high IQ players. And again, who can make shots from all over. And I think when you're able to share the ball, I don't always subscribe to, like, you always hear passing is contagious. And it's like, I agree, but also, like, I don't think that's the thing with the Knicks. I just think the Knicks have a lot of guys who know how to play the right way. Like, I don't think it's like a contagious thing. I just think they're just a bunch of smart basketball players.
Yeah, and a lot of guys, like you mentioned, the cutting, a lot of great cutters on that team between OG,
Josh,
Hart,
McHale.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think if you look at Cat, which you mentioned, likes to please, he has been gift wrapping, talking about Christmas, gift wrapping these passes for these guys as this delay action guy who can make passes from above the break. Like, all of that is really honing in on what maybe we didn't see a lot of in Minnesota. So the question I have, because I think Cat is having a career year for the Knicks, right?
For sure.
The efficiency is off the charts. The passing has been awesome. What has stood out to you from Cat's perspective of, like, why he's fitting in so well in New York?
I think there's a couple things. The spacing that they have as a unit, right? Like, they have even Josh Hart, like, he's shooting the three ball well, but there's four guys that come in with, like, a history that you have to respect.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's now back at center, like, people forget Cat pre-Rudy Gobert was a really, really good rebounder. Right. Then Rudy comes in, he's a little bit more on the perimeter. Rudy's getting a lot more of the rebounds. Now Cat is like I think he's leading the league in rebounds per game. So he's changed his mindset there. And then you look at just Jalen Brunson. He's like, at the end of the day, he's the engine that makes this thing go. Right. Great decision maker. His passing this year to me has been through the roof. You look at the assist numbers and they're higher than they've ever been, which part of it is, like, he has players that make shots. Like, you can't get assists without players making shots, but just his reads in general have been, to me, a notch above any point in his career. So Cat just fits in well with this group. When you have a spacing five who's willing to give up the ball when he doesn't have a great shot, like, that just makes life easier for everybody. And at the end of the day, the Knicks were going to, like, live and die with how good this starting unit can be and how much it can hold up. Like, I don't think anybody questioned how good the starters would be. I think the question would be what would happen when they start staggering, and then what would happen as the season goes on. Do they hold up? And I think what we're seeing is what we all kind of expected in terms of how good they would be. I don't know nobody expected Cat to shoot 46% from three at this point, and I think obviously that'll probably drop, but if it drops to 40, like, that seems reasonable and still very, very good.
Yeah. Man, it's funny you mentioned the shooting percentage, because on the other side of this game, there's another big man, 7'5" guy who's shooting the lights out right now. I mentioned on the show the other day, but he dropped 200 threes before Steph Curry did. Like, he got to 200 threes faster than Steph, which is wild.
That surprised me.
Yeah, it is really surprising. And so Victor Wembanyama versus Cat, that's going to be the matchup, I think, of this Knicks Spurs game. Only East Coast, West Coast game of the night, by the way, for Christmas at all, which is wild. But wanted to ask you, for Wemby, how do you think that the matchup is for them versus the Knicks, and how they might end up trying to guard Wemby? Because he's been on a tear over the last 2 or 3 weeks as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be fascinated to see. I think for Wemby, on the defensive end for him, I think the Knicks are a team that he's going to like to see. They don't get to the free throw line much. Yeah. They don't really. I have to check. It's been a while, but I don't think it's a team that gets to the bucket a ton. They shoot efficiently there, but I still don't think they get to the bucket a ton. And so there's going to be, like, they're going to have to make a lot of jump shots. And Cat's not a guy who gets fouled a lot. You can block a shot at the rim. So Wemby, obviously being elite shot blocker, like, he's going to be very alert there. But in terms of how they guard Wemby, I'm going to be interested to see. I think I could see them maybe forcing him to shoot. If he makes it, he makes it. If he doesn't, he doesn't. I think that's probably the best way to defend Wemby. You bait him into shooting, and if he's hot, you switch up the coverage. If not, you let it keep going.
Live with it, right?
You live with it, because he can pass. But I do think he's still a streaky shooter, and I think that's probably the best point of attack is, like, let's see how he starts the game.
Yeah.
And then we'll adjust accordingly.
Man, I remember like maybe not 5 years ago, probably closer to 10 years ago, matinee game, Milwaukee Bucks versus the New York Knicks. And it was this coming out party for Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like he just dominated. And I wonder if we get that this time with Wemby, because it does seem like he's being given this opportunity. Usually the first game of the night or of Christmas slate is the first game that most people are tuning into because they got dinner later and whatnot. This is in a lot of ways the primetime game. Do you think we're in store for a Wemby breakout type of performance, or you think Tibbs is on the other side working on crazy defensive matchups to figure him out?
I don't know if we're in store for it, but I think the league's hoping so.
Yeah,
I think that's why they put him in that slot against the most rabid fan base in the Garden. Against a really, really, really good team. Like I think that's what the league is hoping for, to allow Wemby to show what he can do and where the future of the league is headed. On the biggest stage pre-playoffs. I think it's going to be fascinating to see. And the Knicks haven't been very good in games that like start before 7 p.m.
So they got the matinee curse. Interesting.
I think like this year there was a really bad game against the Hornets.
Right.
They struggled in Dallas, I think was an early game. I think there's a couple more. If you look at the games that started before 7, they either lost them or struggled, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how many there were, but it's been a thing, I guess. I don't want to say a thing. There haven't been enough of them, but something to monitor, I guess.
Okay, I'll leave you off with this. We're heading into 2025. What would be your New Year's resolution for the Knicks moving into next year?
Stay healthy.
Good resolution. That is a good resolution.
I think every starter is top 7 in minutes in the league, I think, or top 10. The bench, good, not deep. It feels like, I'm going to knock on wood because I don't want to wish injury
does
upon
Landry
anybody.
Shamet not solve all their problems? No?
not right now. I mean, he helps the few some of the problems they have right now, but like if something goes wrong, I don't know if that's going to change much, but I mean, this team is built. This team is top heavy. And I think one injury to a couple guys, like there's a couple guys that I think could have like an interesting trickle down effect. So curious to see.
Knock on wood. Let's keep
you don't want anybody to get hurt.
The holiday spirit, no injury talk here. James, appreciate you as always.
Of course.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy New Year if I don't see you before then.
Same to you, man.
As always, tap into The Athletic, tap into James Edwards, writing New York Knicks. Appreciate you.
Joining me to talk about the Sixers and Celtics big Christmas Day clash, my good buddy, Jared Weiss. Jared, welcome back to the show.
What's up?
Yeah, the Christmas episode. That's what's up. Before we jump to the game, you just dropped a piece at The Athletic on AJ Dybantsa. This guy, I saw some clips of him over the weekend for the first time, and let's just say he pops. Just pops from the screen. Tell me about AJ Dybantsa.
Yeah, he's one of the most complete wings we've seen at the high school level in a decade at least. Like you have to look at guys like RJ Barrett, Zion Williamson, Andrew Wiggins, all guys that when they went to college were pretty elite. Like he's at that level and maybe even a little bit more skilled than those guys. And so he just went to BYU, and this is the second year in a row that BYU has landed like an elite prospect, this time the number 1 guy in high school. And he kind of became the star of this NIL bidding war that really escalated NIL to a new level in the basketball sphere.
Huh. Interesting. Well, so go and read that over at The Athletic. Jared does a really good job breaking down draft prospects every year anyway, and one of the better storytellers that we probably have writing about these guys. But Jared, you're here to talk hoops, man. We're here to talk about the games on Christmas Day, a tradition unlike any other. The Sixers and Celtics. Needless to say, these two teams have not had similar starts to their season. I think the Celtics look just as good as they closed out last year, obviously winning a title. And the Sixers have had what you can only describe as a season from hell, between the injury stuff and just general morass. And honestly, it feels like cursed vibes around there. Catch us up to date on where they are now, because things are actually starting to change for both teams.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the Sixers, because the Sixers are having, is this like the worst season we've seen for a team? And like the last 5 to 10 years as far as like the expectations. And it's not like with, you could look at Memphis last year where they just had massive injuries that kind of crushed them from the start. This is like just guys in and out in a very uncomfortable, unstable way. The way that the franchise has managed the news dissemination of it and the way they're handling the public sphere has just been such a mess. And so it's created this anxiety around the people observing the team. And then you watch them play and they don't have an offense that makes sense to me. They seem lost offensively, and Embiid has been in and out. Paul George is like kind of still there, but also having lots and lots of down games. And it's really been on Tyrese Maxey to carry the load, and he's good enough to do that for a few quarters. I just don't think Tyrese is at the point where you can really expect him to lead a team for 4 quarters. And I mean, I don't think it's him. I think it's like you're basically asking him to score 40 points a game, and that's just not very realistic. I mean, Joel did it. Joel is one of the few guys in the NBA that can do it. And so every time that I've watched the Sixers play, there's a few minutes here or there. I'm like, okay, they're cooking, but they don't cook for long. They're like a microwave. Like it's 2 minutes and then it's done, but it tastes like crap and it burns your mouth.
Okay, now where are the Celtics? That was perfect. I couldn't have said that any better. I love that so much. Please catch me up to date on the Celtics. Where are they right now?
Yeah, I was hoping it made sense when it came out.
It was perfect. No notes. Yeah.
No, sometimes the brilliance comes to you.
I see it.
Just like the Celtics offense. I mean, the Celtics have been very good this year. I wouldn't agree that they picked up right where they left off last year. I think that they aren't quite executing at that same level. Mostly defensively. I don't think their defense is quite as hounding as it was before. I mean, they're so good that like whatever. And that's how I always felt with the Celtics last year. That's how I feel with them this year. Any sort of flaws that they show are pretty much whatever. And that's been a testament to their coaching staff, to their rosters. Like they're very good at breaking habits. They're very good at identifying issues when they pop up. And this is also a team that has to load manage its center rotation a lot. So I think that's going to lead to a lot of inconsistency. And, you look at it, it's like KP coming back from that surgery. Keita and Cornette deal with some injuries often. And then obviously Al Horford is 95 years old, although it doesn't seem to matter. So they have a lot of maintenance and pacing they have to do with their center rotation. And that obviously puts a lot of responsibility on the Jays, who are the other bigger guys in their rotation, to handle a lot of physicality defensively. So I think that's going to lead to some inconsistencies. And so, the
but
Celtics,
this is a 55 win floor for this team, right? Like, I mean, listen to how you're speaking about them. This is a team
that's 60 win floor, honestly.
It could be. Like, I mean, they just have so much talent. And now with Porzingis back and they look really like you see this complete team at times, right? Like we know what is going to be come May and June. So do you feel like this is more just, okay, they're working their way through the season because they know what it takes to get through it and to try to be healthy?
I think it's that. They also, Peyton Pritchard has really transformed his game this year. He's become like a pretty complete offensive player now. He looks like a starter,
Jared.
I mean, he looks like he could be an all-star if you put him in certain teams. I mean, probably all-star level and being an all-star
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, all-star level and all-star are two different things, because there's like 50 guys that are all-star level, but only a few make it. But he's been so good, and Drew Holiday hasn't really been that good shooting and scoring this year, that they have a bit of a dilemma here to figure out like who's their closing lineup, and which is crazy to say on Drew Holiday.
That's an amazing
just paid a ton of money
to say.
too. Yeah, and we're seeing Pritchard closing sometimes, and there's good reason for it. Like he's not just like a hot streak kind of guy. Like he kind of does it all for their offense now, and his defense has been good enough. We'll see how it is. A game like Philadelphia, assuming that Embiid and George are both playing, which I think they're going to.
I think they are. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a team that can really catch Pritchard out on an island on some switches, and we'll see how they attack him. But that's kind of the thing the Celtics are figuring out at this point, is like, where are their vulnerabilities? Because besides just some inconsistencies and some guys not being healthy, there's not a lot for this team.
Well, let's talk about Drew Holiday. I want to bring up that 4 of 17 from 3 game. I mean, that is sort of, I've got a huge pin in that on my Celtics board. When I'm thinking about getting to playoff time, what are the narratives we need to consider? He's going to be left open to shoot. And I think that, like you said, it creates this sort of lineup dilemma a little bit when you're closing games. But if you're the Celtics, I mean, is there really a world in which you could see Peyton Pritchard getting the green light down the stretch of games to, over a guy like Drew Holiday?
Well, it is happening. And
but it's early.
It is early. I don't think that they're doing this just for the fun of it to see if it's a viable thing. Okay. I think they're doing it on nights where it makes sense. And Holiday shooting 32.4% from three at this point. He's probably kind of come back around. Like, he's been shooting well generally the last few years when he's in these spot up roles. And obviously last year he was great. As long as Holiday's shooting the ball decently, like, I think he's going to be out there because he brings so much defensively. But these guys had long summers, and it's not a surprise to see them come out a little bit sluggish. But White's been great. Tatum's been great. Hasn't really been an issue for them. So, I don't know exactly what it is with Holiday, but I would assume that he's going to come around and get back close to what he was last year at some point.
Any big takeaways from this one game that you're going to be looking for? And again, understanding that the Sixers have had such a rough season and they're still getting their feet under them. But, what do you want to see out of the Sixers and what do you want to see out of the Celtics?
Well, obviously the Celtics defense, it's really hard to stay in your offensive identity the way you want to, because their whole thing is, we're going to take away a lot of the advantages you create and we're going to force you to attack cross matches. That's their thing. They're going to switch a lot. We'll see how it goes on Embiid. I assume Porzingis, if they're in the drop, like, he's going to be kind of dealing with Embiid in the post a lot. But like the Celtics, this is a question for them of, like, can they handle the physicality of Embiid, assuming Embiid is playing? Can they handle a team that will draw doubles and force them to rotate and close out a lot? Because obviously that's one of the ways that you can beat the Celtics. You can get a ton of threes up against them. I don't know if the Sixers are going to be able to do that. I'm hopeful, but this game is mostly about the Sixers. This is about, like, can the Sixers just, like, get it together for a big marquee game and make a statement? Because, like, they got to make a statement at some point, and whatever, if they can keep all the outside noise out, that's great. But, like, they got to do it for themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now's the time, Jared, where I ask you to give a New Year's resolution for these teams, because we're actually taking the rest of the week off. It's very, very nice. Wonderful holidays around here. So, Jared, I mean, I think the Sixers one probably is just related to health and, getting rest and recovery. But would there be something that you wish for them for the rest of the season outside of health?
Well, I think with the Sixers, the resolution is to find an offensive identity that can persist regardless of who's out there. So obviously, when you have Embiid versus not having Embiid, that changes pretty much everything. The one thing I've been disappointed with Embiid is that I don't think he has versatilized his game as much as I expected that he would from a few years ago, even if he isn't quite as reliant on just, like, pounding into the post. But I thought we would see a ton more short roll playmaker on the move kind of stuff. We're not quite seeing it as much as I had hoped for. So they need to find something that lasts every single night, whether he's resting, whether George is out. And that's something where it's Tyrese Maxey transition, drive and kick games, counting on these other complementary wings to be decent playmakers, learning how to use the Yabusele, Drummond, like, in the short roll effectively, so that they have some consistency when they go from first unit to second unit and game to game. And they just haven't really had it yet.
Yeah. Sounds like we need Nick Nurse to get an offensive playbook for Christmas. What about the Celtics? What do you wish, or what should their resolution be for the new year?
Stay healthy.
Stay healthy.
Make sure Kristaps Porzingis stays healthy.
Keep shooting threes. Keep shooting threes. Don't listen to the haters.
I mean, there could be some refinement to their 3-point selection, but I've generally felt like their threes are fine. Maybe find a little bit more consistency on defense. Like that would probably be it. Yeah.
Well, guys, go and read Jarrett over at The Athletic. Again, is one of the best writers that we've got, and one of my favorite guys to podcast with. So thanks for popping on the show. We don't get you on here enough, but 2025 is going to be busy for Jared Weiss. I can see it right now. Guys, stick around after the break. Zena and Anthony Slater are going to talk about the Warriors and Lakers, Steph versus LeBron, because it's Christmas Day and the league is out of ideas.
And now we've got Anthony Slater joining me to talk Warriors, Lakers, senior NBA writer at The Athletic. You actually spent some time down in LA. looking at the Lakers as of late. And it's interesting because both of these teams, the Warriors and the Lakers, given similar vibes, also both trying to fight their way up the conference rankings. What are some of your thoughts going into this Christmas Day game matchup?
Well, I mean, you mentioned it, but they're part of this pack in the West between 5 and 12, right? And to me, they're two of obviously the more discussed, probably the two most discussed of those. And I think they're really in similar situations and seem to me kind of be similar level of team where you have your fading giant of a figure, right? Top 10 players of all time. Obviously LeBron and Steph. LeBron older. He's about to turn 40 this month. I think like this week, right? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, he's kind of battling age more than we've seen in previous years. He stepped away from the team for a week, basically kind of like regenerating his, motor. And I saw them play the Kings twice and he looked awesome. Particularly in the first half of the second Kings game, it was like bully ball power LeBron.
Right.
He'd kind of gotten his gas tank refilled.
Very vintage. Yes.
But he also did like a post shoot around like state of, the union address type thing in Sacramento, which was pretty interesting. And he's pretty openly admitting like, it takes more these days, which, it's expected. It's crazy. It's taken this long to really even see, him starting to chip away. But Steph Curry, similarly with the Warriors, maybe not to the degree where he's taken a week away, but he sat some games because of this double knee tendonitis. He's openly talked about how it's something new he's dealing with as he gets older. And both of them have what we would probably all consider average supporting cast that aren't like championship supporting casts.
Right.
And I do think the league and the country in a lot of ways would still love to see these guys at the highest level competing West Finals type games. We saw it in the Olympics, right? I mean, that was great theater when they were together. But they're both, I just don't think have enough. And you do wonder, come trade deadline, can their respective front offices help them? We'll see. But it is interesting to see them both kind of at the same state and meeting on a showcase stage, right? Christmas, they're the big brands, but kind of as aging players with flawed rosters around them.
It is interesting, the parallels between, like, as you laid that out, I was like, wow, there is this like saga in between these two teams. And it's going to be a matter of what front office decides to make their hero of the story, their protagonist, give them a little bit more support. Now, the Warriors have made a move, right? Of course, adding Dennis Schroeder into the mix. The vibes are good, according to Steph. He says that even though they just had that 51-point loss against the Memphis Grizzlies, they're trying, they're on the comeback. And this is when they can start stacking some wins. What would you say is the overall vibe of the team? Like, if you had a State of the Union in the way that LeBron gave it for him, if you had a State of the Union for the Warriors, like, where do they sit right now as the real start of the NBA season begins? Yeah,
look, I don't think they have deep chemistry issues, and I think that's what he's alluding to, right? I mean, obviously, you go back a few years to the preseason punch and like everything. Like, I do think they're probably in a better, more like veteran state in the locker room, and that's fine, but like that doesn't necessarily lead to wins and losses. Eventually, when they pile up a 2-9 stretch, you can like each other all you want. Suddenly there's a lot more when there's something to be blamed for, which is losses, everybody, including the outside world, is looking who needs to be blamed here. Is it the front office? Is it, various players, the young guys wanting too much, the old guys aren't, what they used to be, whatever. Like, and that leads to bad vibes, even if, again, it's not like, dislike of each other in the locker room.
Sure,
but, like,
you can hear that stuff. Like,
they're going through a rough patch right now. And they're also in this strange transitional phase with, this young layer of the roster again in year whatever it is now of this 2 timeline plan, trying to, become good enough, but they also have their own careers in mind. Obviously, Jonathan Kuminga is like, at the forefront of this. They keep yanking his, role around where it's like, last week they're platforming him like, he's
this is now the Jonathan Kuminga show, and now it's like,
now it's like, I think Kyle Anderson's going to start over you tonight. So
it's very confusing for a young guy.
Yeah, and Steve had the interesting comments post game, basically like on telling his young guys, but it felt very directed at Kuminga, like, stop taking contested 15 footers early in the clock. I'm paraphrasing what he said. You got Steph Curry on the team, but it's like, you keep yanking Kuminga's life and role and potentially financials around enough, and he's just whatever, it's like, you're not going to get this extremely bought in version of him necessarily. So
And
they're going through stuff as they integrate Dennis Schroeder into the lineup, but they're coming off a very nice road win in Minnesota. They did get that. We'll see what happens. We're talking before the Monday night game against the Pacers, but leading into Christmas, we'll see.
now here's the difference between the Warriors and the Lakers. The Warriors seem like there could be some changes internally that could fix what's going on. Also, the trade market is available to them. The Lakers, it feels as if the trade market is where they should be able to find some answers rather than within their own team. But Anthony Davis in good form within December, at least. Like, what did you see from him as a supporting castmate to LeBron against the Kings?
Yeah, he looks great. He's having a good year. It's not, he started really good. Remember they got out to what was their start, like 7-2, something like that.
The Warriors were the same.
yeah, right. That's right. 12-3 actually, and then 2-9 in the 11 after that. But as far as Davis goes, that's one thing that he has, or that LeBron has, that Steph doesn't, which is like a legitimate in his prime all-star, superstar. And, you could tell LeBron's tried to really the last 4 years, like tried to transition it to the point that it's like, hey, you're Davis, you're the one and I'm the two on this roster. And I think you saw it in the title year, the bubble year, right? He was incredible. I covered that Lakers team on that bubble title run. He was, there was an argument coming out of those playoffs that he was like a top 3, top 5 player in the league.
Absolutely.
That's no longer there, but still he wrecks defensively. He's certainly a defensive player of the year candidate. He's scoring better. I think JJ Redick has a little bit more of a complex, better offense to suit Davis. And he's having a good season. But to me, he's not the concern, right? I think you have a legitimate co-star for LeBron. The concern is like rotation spot 3 through 11 on that team.
So now Warriors coming into this game, last 10 games, 3 of 7, where the Lakers are 5 of 5. Again, Warriors less than average performance.
Mediocre is
mediocrity. Right. Mediocre. So that's what I'm wondering, like with these two teams matching up for the first time this season, it's always popcorn when they go up against each other, like in terms of just like the competition. Every time these two teams match up, Steph goes off, LeBron goes off. It's just always something there. Do we think that it's going to replicate? Like it's always going to still be that like saga-esque type of matchup between these two on Christmas Day?
Yes, because I think one of the problems that these guys have is like reaching down in the tank on a nightly basis during an NBA season when it's January and you're facing the Magic, Monday, December 23rd and you're facing the Pacers, for example, or whatever. Right. That Christmas against LeBron, Christmas against Steph, Christmas against your in-state big brand rival is not the day where those two are like, I don't know if I have it tonight, right? Like you expect them to come with juice, and when they still like turn it up to 8, 9, 10. They're a spectacle. So I do expect it to be a great matchup, number one. And then stakes wise, I mentioned it, but this is a compact part of the standings, just like it was last year when they were basically the similar versions of what they are now. And I don't know if you got the standings up. I believe the Lakers, remember, was the last day of the regular season. Everybody's all tied up, bunched up. The Lakers win and end up getting that into the 7-8 plan and playing their way into the playoffs, where the Warriors obviously dropped right at the end into that 9-10 bracket. I would assume they're going to have very similar records come April again. So these head-to-head matchups are huge, right? They're 2-game swings, one way or the other. You win it or you lose it. So like there's like relatively, decent stakes, I think too.
Again, we're talking before the Warriors play the Pacers, but right now 6th and 7th. That's how these two teams stack up. All right. Now, before I let you go, I got to ask you, it's the end of the year. It's going to be 2025. If you had a New Year's resolution for the Warriors, what would it be?
Clarity on Jonathan Kuminga's role and future within the franchise. Are you going to give him an opportunity, a long runway to figure out if he can be like kind of an ascendant 32-minute per night player on your team? Are you going to trade him? Or are you going to kind of keep, bouncing him back and forth, minimizing him, but still have him on the roster come February 9th or whatever the day after the trade deadline is? I would just That's the New Year's resolution. He's in his fourth season. He's a restricted free agent this summer. The league wants to know about him, not even just us, right? People who want to
the whole market, right?
Yes, people who want to trade for him, people who want to either give him or not give him a huge contract this summer. He wants to know about himself. Viewers want to know, but I think we just need to see more of him to know more.
Exactly. Okay, I'm with you. I absolutely believe that. All right, well, we appreciate you breaking down the Warriors-Lakers preview for Christmas Day. Go read Anthony Slater on The Athletic. He covers the Warriors, but also lets us know about what's going on in California overall. So we appreciate you, Anthony. Thank you.
Merry Christmas to everybody from the Saturday Slam and Jam. I'm your host, Andrew Schlecht. With me is Alex Speers. We are here to talk about some Christmas wishes. Al, what would you like to see happen in the NBA around Christmas time for maybe a fan base or a player or a team? What you got?
This may feel like it's coming out of left field just because it's very specific and random, but my Christmas wish, Andrew, is for the Pistons, the Detroit Pistons, to make an unequivocally great trade. Okay.
Wow.
Now, the reason why I'm even mentioning this, they're 12-17 right now.
Yeah.
After, they've been terrible for a long time. We all know that. They're 12-17, also not great, but they are in a play-in spot. They have a great opportunity to make the play-in this season. They're still not good. The Cleaning the Glass has them as the 20th ranked offense, 20th ranked defense. So they don't exactly have an identity. But Bobby Marks for ESPN was kind of doing a trade deadline primer. And he said, I asked team executives from both conferences to give me one team that controls the February 6th deadline. The answer might surprise you, the Detroit Pistons. And the reason is because, we're in this environment now where no one has cap space. Yeah. Everyone's either up against the tax or into the aprons. They have $14 million in space. For the first time I can remember, they have leverage against the rest of the league. I mean, going back through Troy Weaver's stint as their GM, one of the themes of that time period was just poor asset management. Like they never really had extra first to trade. They never really had leverage in a lot of these deals. They oftentimes would wait until a guy was a little bit past his peak value, whether it was Jeremy Grant, only getting a first in that deal when, a year earlier they were talking about, we think Jeremy Grant might get 2 firsts. Bojan Bogdanovic waiting just a little bit too long and not being able to get a first. Finally, they are in a position where they have some leverage and they have some future firsts now. They could go make a deal. Now, I don't need it to be like for a star trade, okay? I'm literally just asking for them to make a trade and everybody unanimously agrees, hey, that's a really great trade. Because you look back at what they have done, you don't even have to go back to Troy Weaver. This summer, the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade. Didn't like it at the time. I still think it was weird, just like the whole Quentin Grimes situation, how he only plays 6 games. They have no interest in bringing him back or whatever. They trade him to Dallas. Now, of course, he's like 40% shooter and a really good role player. Trading him for Tim Hardaway Jr., who, yes, offers them some theoretical shooting, but isn't really going to change your life. But you go even back further than that. I mean, there was the Marvin Bagley dump, using almost $20 million in cap space to trade for Joe Harris, who was done, and just getting a couple seconds out of it. There was the infamous James Wiseman, Sadiq Bey trade. I mentioned how, they waited probably a little too long on Jeremy Grant trade. They did get a first, and that was a first that they used in the deal to land them Jalen Duren. But they have now traded and that was a future Milwaukee first. That pick is now owned by Brooklyn. Can actually convey next year if it falls between 5 and 30, which is kind of interesting. Even the deals where you look back and it was pretty positive at the time. Like I'm thinking of like the original Bojan Bogdanovic trade when they got him from Utah. People kind of like that one at the time. It's just funny looking back at that deal, knowing that they waited too long to trade Bogdanovic again and not get a first. And then the player they traded, Kelly Olynyk, did end up returning a first for the Utah Jazz. Basically what I'm saying, Andrew, is like, can they just nail a trade? Can they just make a trade that we all think is good? And this is the time to do it. Because like Bobby Marks said, Like they kind of controlled this deadline because of that space. Maybe it only ends up them being a third team in some deal between two other teams, but that space should be so valuable. Like even if the trade is just them getting back a really juicy first, I'm cool with that. It doesn't have to be a star trade. Now, if you do want to talk about trading for actual rotation players, you know, I went and looked at Sam Vecini's trade board, which is very good. The two names that he brought up in relation to the Pistons were Colin Sexton and Anthony Simons. And the reason to bring up both of those guys is that if you look at the on-off numbers with Detroit right now, they're like a middle-of-the-road offense when Cade is on the floor, which is pretty good considering some of their other players on their team that are a little bit offensive deficient. When he's off the court, they're a bottom 5 offense. You know, Jaden Ivey hasn't exactly been able to handle that sort of load in terms of running a second unit. So if you could bring someone in like a Colin Sexton, who I don't know if I necessarily think of as like running a unit, but he's definitely a very good offensive player, or Anthony Simons, who we've talked about previously, I do still feel like there's some upside there. Both of those guys are in the mid-20s. I kind of like either of those options. Now, I would hope that the Colin Sexton deal would be a little cheaper in terms of what you're having to give up. You know, I wouldn't want to give up a ton. I wouldn't want to give up one of their young guys. Simons, I might be a little more willing to do. But the problem with those types of trades for the Pistons is I have no idea how to judge the value of their young pieces. You know, whether it's Ron Holland, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson. Like, how would Portland, for instance, rank those players? Obviously, they probably don't want Jalen Duren because they have center covered.
Definitely not.
Would they want to take on a non-shooting wing when they already have like some shooting issues on that team going forward? I don't know. Would they be interested in Jaden Ivey, which you kind of reintroduce the 3-guard situation that you're trying to get out of with the Anthony Simons deal? Yeah. So I don't know, but I'm just saying they're in a great position, Andrew. They have some leverage. Come on, Pistons. Do something good.
Yeah, I think that they may run into a problem here. You know, like Ron Holland is a really interesting prospect, 6'8", but the shooting is going to be a concern. Same with 6'7", Asar Thompson. I feel like they have problems with each of them, but the issue that I would have with trading either one of them is that it's so early for each of them, and which one is going to pop, I think is a legitimate question. And I would probably lean Asar Thompson just because I like what I saw from him last year, but like, do we know for sure? And then if you traded the wrong one, because both these guys have like some serious upside and some serious downside, that would scare me a bit. But also, do you have the developmental time for either one of them, you know, for both of them actually, to get on the court and to play significant minutes to figure it out? I think there's a lot of issues with the Pistons, but that's probably where I would start. And if I'm Portland, that's where I would start with the trade. It's like, give me one of those guys is who I would want in a deal, just because they're at least intriguing enough for a rebuilding team. But if they traded Asar Thompson for somebody, I don't think it would be lauded. I'll say that.
Okay. Probably not.
They may have some leverage, but I think we might still be a little bit away from them having an unequivocally great trade done. Okay. My Christmas wish, and it feels like it's already on the table. Like, let's be honest. Sam Amick and Anthony Slater, good friends of the program, are reporting that there is some interest in trading him, in trading De'Aaron Fox from the Kings to somewhere. The Spurs have been brought up as a team that would be interested. And then Fox has even talked about it on Draymond Green's podcast, that he wants to make sure that we're in a position to try to win in the future, because that's ultimately what I want to do. For me, it's, are we looking like we're continuing to get better year after year, or are we going to be able to compete at a high level? Not looking so good for the Sacramento Kings, who are currently sitting at 12th in the Western Conference. Now they're only 4 games back of the 6th spot, so like things can change quickly in the Western Conference. But losers of 4 in a row as we sit here recording this, 13 and 17. It just has not been a great season for them. Even if they did have a great few weeks and they climb back into the play-in race, I just feel like they're stuck in the middle with this roster. Just probably the worst place to be in the NBA. And if this really is how De'Aaron Fox feels, that he wants to compete and get better year after year, and he has Rich Paul as his agent, I just wonder if we're heading toward some kind of trade. And to me, it makes sense for both parties, for the Kings to probably bottom out a little bit, although they were stuck there for 16 years. They're just going to have to do it the right way. To trade Fox, get something good in return, which I think that you could, just because there's not a lot of great players on the trade market besides he and Jimmy Butler. So for the Spurs, I just wonder what it would look like. Now, they could trade a package of like Keldon Johnson, Trey Jones, Malachi Branham, and probably like 3 first-round picks for De'Aaron Fox. What do you think about that kind of deal, Al, for Fox?
It all comes down to what the Kings want to do. Like, it's very easy for you to say, like, they should bottom out. But I could totally see from their like perspective thinking like, oh, we just want to make a trade that allows us to, continue to try to get better. I mean, they already, they just signed DeMar DeRozan.
Sure.
They're not really in a position to truly bottom out. They're clearly, if they did trade Fox, regardless of what they got back, they're probably going to be outside of the play-in picture. Mm-hmm. But, I would be open to the idea of a picks heavy trade if they were good picks. I just don't know if that's what the Kings would want.
I don't either. I get the feeling that they would not be, which would almost make them stuck in the middle more. I also wonder if, like, instead of picks, they would want a Jeremy Sohan, who is like more of a ready-made product. I don't love the idea of putting Sohan next to Domantas Sabonis. Maybe you would trade Sabonis at some point. Instead, I also don't know if the Spurs would be willing to include him. I think he's an interesting player for sure, and an interesting archetype of player that's not necessarily easy to get, and is not also necessarily the player that you want just because of the shooting. So I don't know about throwing him in or not, but I think there are many pathways, I would say, for the San Antonio Spurs to get in on this, whether it is a picks heavy deal. They have young talent that you could throw back at the Kings. I think they've already been mentioned by Amick and Slater, but I do think there's a lot of viable trades that exist there. I also wondered about this one. If they wanted to stay competitive and they wanted something for the future, I wonder if Houston would be willing to get in on this and trade Fred VanVleet and Reed Shepherd to the Kings for De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, and Trey Lyles, just to make the money work. What do you think about that kind of trade?
Of the ones that you sent to me, Andrew, this is the one that I'm most intrigued by.
Yeah, I like this one
because from the Rockets' perspective, I really like the idea of De'Aaron Fox. He's been really good in a pick and roll with Sabonis these last couple of years. Maybe that would translate to with Şengün. But more importantly, we know that he is a clutch performer. Mm-hmm. He won Clutch Player of the Year, right? A few years ago?
He did. He won Clutch Player of the Year. Yes.
And that's exactly what they need. Like that, they need that kind of offense first player who can take over at the end of the game. And I do think that is what De'Aaron Fox is. Now, from the Kings' perspective, you have to think that Reed Shepherd should have been like a top 2 pick in this last year's draft.
Yeah.
Which is actually something that I do believe.
Yeah.
Now I know that it has not been amazing so far in Houston. He hasn't gotten a lot of playing time. That's a really deep roster.
Right.
But you have to believe that Reed Shepherd has future star potential to even entertain this deal. Because yes, it's nice to get Fred VanVleet back and kind of stabilize your team, and maybe you can make a run to the play-in, and maybe you could get in the playoffs. But this trade would really be about your belief in Reed Shepherd becoming like a star level player in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Reed Shepherd to the Rockets was always a funny fit to me, because if you look at like what the plan is for this Rockets team, it's a lot of length and athleticism and guys that can defend. And he's like none of those things. He doesn't fit the mold as a Rockets player at all. And so I think that giving him a fresh start with Sacramento, letting him have the ball a little bit more and create, I think Sabonis is a good big for him. Not that Şengün wouldn't be, but I think that it's hard to find the pathway for him right now. And I think that if he had another place where he could really flourish under Mike Brown, who coached a guy that's similar to Reed and Steph Curry. I think a lot of people have made that comp. Obviously, Reed is nowhere close to what Steph is. but he's a similar kind of player and similar kind of shooter. I think that could be pretty interesting. So that was my favorite. A couple others were De'Aaron Fox to the Toronto Raptors, a team that has trouble bottoming out. And so I think that he would be interesting there. They just extended Emmanuel quickly. I don't love his deal more than I examined it. I don't love it. But if you're the Kings, like, he's a player that's ready to play now. He's $32 million over the next $32 million a year right now. And then Grady Dick, and then probably an extra first round pick. Does that get the juices flowing at all?
I like the idea of Grady Dick.
Yeah.
Didn't know you were throwing in a pick. Thank you.
Yeah.
Makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
But the quickly deal for them just feels like you're downgrading the position, but you're still taking up a lot of your cap space.
It's problematic for sure.
I just don't see the path forward for them either way. And the fact that he's in the first year of a 5-year deal. I mean, you would have to love Emmanuel Quickly to be ready to as another team to want to commit to that contract that he signed. So I just don't think I could do it. From the Raptors' perspective, I'm kind of into it. It would be a clear upgrade on Quickly. And, you know, the argument about this Raptors core is it's just like not good enough. Well, at least if you get De'Aaron Fox in there, now you have like a second all-star caliber player with Scotty Barnes. RJ Barrett's obviously been very good this season.
RJ's been great.
And maybe you can start building something there. But really, I don't love that deal.
Yeah. And then the last one, just because it's the Lakers. You got to throw the Lakers in there. It'd have to be there. I think they only have one first that they can trade. So they'll give the one first. And then D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, and Dalton Connect for De'Aaron Fox. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
D'Angelo Russell's expiring, so a little cap relief there. You get Austin Reeves, who's on a really he's on a really nice deal, and then you get Dalton Connect, good shooter, that can come off the bench.
In a trade is so much different from just having Dalton Connect on your team, because like when you're drafting Dalton Connect, he was a 17th pick, right?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
You're getting a pick every year. You draft this guy. It doesn't really matter how old he is. It's like if you found a good player at 17, like that's awesome. Like regardless of how old he is. If you're trading your star player though, and you're getting back a 24-year-old rookie, like that kind of changes the calculus.
Yeah,
because now you are giving up something of significant value as opposed to just spending a pick. And so you would really have to believe that Dalton Connect has like untapped potential that he can tap into almost immediately.
Listen, he's gotten better every year since he was a youngster.
Oh, I thought you were talking about like literally in the NBA.
Not in the NBA, but he's looked good. He's ready to play in the NBA. I think that
I will say his minutes have been declining recently.
Listen,
it's been a minute since we've had one of those big games. He scored double digits once over his last 10 games.
Listen, don't bring logic into this. I'm trying to get the Lakers De'Aaron Fox. Okay, Al. I'm just trying to.
Also, from the Lakers' perspective, a team that we always talk about as a team with limited depth.
Yeah.
I realize that like it would be awesome to get De'Aaron Fox.
It would be.
But shipping off 3 of your rotation players for a team that is already super thin, I don't think that's getting you anywhere either.
Yeah, the problem with the Lakers, the problem with the Lakers though is like I don't think you're getting anywhere with the depth you have, anyways. So
yeah, but if this is, it feels like if they're going to make a move, it has to be like for this year. So how do you fill out the rest of that roster? What is your 8-man rotation in the playoffs if you're trading away Austin Reeves, Dalton Connect, D'Angelo Russell?
Listen, I mean that they are not going to be a team that competes for a championship, like period. So you might as well.
Then you shouldn't make this sort of trade.
You should just get a great starting 5. I don't know that like D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, Dalton Connect are any of those guys going to be on the next great Lakers team? You know, I'd rather just have De'Aaron Fox.
Okay. I mean, I guess I can understand that. You are giving up in this scenario, if you are committing to this, Andrew, an unprotected future first, which is pretty juicy.
Yeah, it is. And that's why you do it if you're the Kings.
Yeah.
Because you just don't believe that this is going to last. And you pick up like a couple role players, you get some cap relief with D'Angelo Russell expiring. I think it's interesting. Overall, I think that I would guess if he is traded, the 2 Texas teams make the most sense. Get him to San Antonio. There's a lot of ways you could do that. And then I do think the Rockets have intriguing pieces to make this happen. Yeah, and you start with Fred VanVleet's contract and then you work your way around it.
Yeah, one thing I will say, compared to listening to podcasts try to come up with Brandon Ingram trades, much easier with De'Aaron Fox, I will say.
Much easier.
These are some reasonable trades, depending on how many picks are thrown in.
Yeah. I think they're reasonable too. Hope you guys get some reasonable presents on Christmas and that we get some reasonably great NBA basketball on Christmas. Really thankful for all you guys that tune into the Slam and Jam every Saturday. We really appreciate you guys a lot. I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will talk to you guys again in a couple weeks.